Hello. So, in this video, which will be rather long, I guess it will take more than half an hour, so it will be longer than usual. I will examine a two different grammars that were taught in Greek school, grammars of Katharevousa, as Katharevousa was taught in Greek schools. One, the first book, and I will put, by the way, links to where you can get the PDF of these books in the description. The first of these books was published, is the book you see here, and it was used in the beginning of the 20th century. So you can see it was published in 1905. And so, okay, my grandfather was born in that year, in 1905. So it's a book, let's say, that probably um, my grandfather, the language my grandfather was taught should have been quite similar. I don't think much would have changed by the time my grandfather started going to school. And the second book, which I have here, it was published in the last year of the dictatorship. So this would be much closer to what my father would be taught at school. It was published in 1974. Okay. Now, let me make a few remarks at the beginning about these two books. What is remarkable about these books is the following. First of all, they will teach you to divide they will teach you to divide the letters of the Greek alphabet, as well as they will teach you how to put the stresses, as if the phonetic rules of ancient Greek still applied. They will never explain to the students that the way modern Greek and ancient Greek is pronounced differently. They will teach them to understand the stresses and the letters as if they were ancient Greek, although uh, they pronounce them as modern Greek. Okay, so if this sounds confusing, it's because it's really confusing, and it was really confusing for the students, I suppose. That's one thing. A second thing is that we can see some evolution, some differences between the books. And let me start, first of all, with this book. You can see here, it says grammar of the spoken and written Katharevousa of modern Greek. So here, the big words are modern Greek. The implication being that, this is the language you should speak. Uh, it's just Katharevousa here is understood as an adjective. You're sort of saying this is the grammar of pure Greek, but this is Greek. This is what you're studying here. Whereas here, in the second book from 1974, it's quite clear. It says grammar and syntax of simple Katharevousa. Katharevousa here is used as a noun. So it's very clear to the mind of the author there are two versions of Greek, whereas in the previous book it was more like this is the right version of Greek. In this book, in the 1974 book, which was published, of course, 70 years after, so there is a difference. Um, the implication is that they understand quite well this is just a version of Greek. Um, Another thing we'll see is in the first book there are some differences. The first book, the 1905 book, is significantly closer to ancient Greek. We will see how the dative is taught in both books. The differences are quite interesting. So let me start because I don't want to make this significantly longer than half an hour if possible. So this book, unfortunately, we only have it in parts. There is no PDF that contains the full book. What I have here, they start with the nouns. So I will show you how the nouns were taught in a Greek school in 1905, in the beginning of the 20th century, and also some hints that you can use as somebody who studies modern Greek. Okay, okay. Let's start with this word here. So, δευτερόκλητα αρσενικά, yeah. these are masculine words in os, and okay, they're very close to what you have in modern Greek, yeah? The difference is there would be no dative, so you have here the dative, which no longer exists, and here there would be no n, yeah? No n, we would just say ton adelphon. But if you say ton adelphon, it's not that it's wrong, it just sounds very, very archaic. Okay, the rest of it, with the exception, of course, of the stresses, is exactly the same. But notice this book has a dative. Okay, let's move on. I mean, the plural, same story. The plural will be the same as the in modern Greek, with the exception again of the dative. We don't use this anymore. The rest would be the same. Now, notice also the article here. They would put "o" as if it were an article. Uh, I don't even know if the term, I'm not a specialist to judge on this, but I'm not sure the term article is the correct one to use for this word here. In any case, they would teach students that, there is an article for the vocative. Okay, this "o." Yeah. Okay. And by the way, just to be clear about it, in case anybody is in doubt, yeah, when you are taught to study this word, this language, Katharevousa, you would have been taught to um, to pronounce it as modern Greek. Although, of course, if the difference between ancient Greek and modern Greek in terms of pronunciation were explained, it would have been tremendously useful to the students. But this never happened. Yeah. So you were told about, at least that's how I was taught at school back in the 90s, ancient Greek. I would be taught that, there are long and short vowels, but it was never explained what the difference is actually when you pronounce them. Okay. Or I would be told that, um, I was never told at school actually that, the diphthongs in ancient Greek were pronounced differently. I was never taught that thing. Maybe it was mentioned in the first 5 minutes of before studying ancient Greek, quickly by the teacher, and I never remembered it. But it was never taught the way it should have been taught. Okay, so here we have the interesting group, a very interesting group, the words in os, which are feminine and not masculine. Okay, if you know anything about modern Greek, you know these words are very problematic in modern Greek for Greeks as well. The idea is the endings would be exactly the same as with the masculine words, but you have to have the feminine article. Okay, and now let's go quickly through the words. Okay, iodos is a feminine word in modern Greek as well, but idrosos, well, modern Greeks would say idrosia, and we write it like this, iota alpha. Iambelos has become to abeli. Inisos has become to nisi. Okay, I hope you notice a pattern here. And if I continue here, ιατραπός is the same, but it's a word that we use very rarely. Ιδωκός is το δοκάρι, η κυβωτός το κυβότιο, η τροφός, η αηδός, okay, η φυγός, let me go a bit more. Η ράβδος is το ραβδί, η βίβλος το βιβλίο, η νόσος is no longer really used, we just say η αρρώστια, η τάφρος, η άμμος, okay, let me see, η άσφαλτος is used, η έλαφος, we say το ελάφι, η βάσανος, το βάσανο, η κάμιλος, η καμήλα, and more. Okay, I can go on. So what basically happened here is that either the word changed gender, so kivotos became to kivotio, and let's say iravdos to ravdi, so it changed gender, or it remained a feminine, changing the ending. Very, very commonly this happened. So for instance, ikamilos, well, we remove this os ending, which is confusing to us because to modern Greek, this os ending would typically be a masculine, not a feminine ending, and we make it ikamila. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this is one thing that would pose a big difficulty in a young Greek learning this language at school. I can imagine my grandfather struggling with that, okay, because this is quite different. You have to, in your mind, to think, oh, I say to abeli, but to speak Katharevousa, I have to say iambelos, and then add the masculine endings, iambelos, tisabelu, tiabelo, etc. Okay, let me move on a bit. Tofito, that's fine. The thing here that for a modern Greek would be kind of difficult would be this additional n. This is kind of the marker between Katharevousa and Demotiki, or modern Standard Greek as well. You wouldn't put this n here. Okay. Another marker, if we look at the next word, would be this the. In words that have this the, we usually have n, t, ni, taf. Το δέντρο, ο άντρας instead of ο άντρας. Okay, but other than that, we're fine. Okay, a last thing I want to draw your attention to here, because I mean there are so many things I could spend, many hours with this, is this. Okay, when we get to the bloody difficult ones, the ones that end with a consonant, these at least from my times learning ancient Greek at school, these were the hardest ones. So what do you do with these ones? How, if one of you, if somebody among you is learning modern Greek, knowing already some ancient Greek, what you have to be careful with is the accusative. If you notice the accusative, then you know how the word works in modern Greek. Okay, so because in modern Greek it could be kind of less common for words to end with consonants. So, but the accusative, you notice it ends with a vowel. So you take the accusative as the base case. So in ancient Greek it would be o korax, and the accusative would be ton koraka. Okay, the accusative is exactly the same in modern Greek. It would still be ton koraka. Now, how do you make the nominative? Well, you add an s here. O korakas. And you see, actually, the student here had to translate this to modern Greek to know what's going on. So I can imagine my poor grandfather doing the same thing when he was at school to say, okay, let's see now what the teacher is talking about. When you say okorax, he really means okorakas. It's a raven, right? It's a crow. I'm not sure how best to translate in English. It's the big black bird. Ton koraka, yeah, that's and to have the nominative in modern Greek will be ton okorakas. So you take the accusative and you stick an s. If flocks, sounds very funny. You just take the accusative again, tin floga, and if it's a feminine word, you do nothing, nothing. You just change the article. If loga gives you the nominative. Or onyx, well, you remove the vowel at the beginning. Okay, but again, you have to take the accusative. Τον όνυχα, τον ήχη. Okay, the ending is a bit different to match because this word became neuter in modern Greek. But yeah, that's very common. These are two things to pay attention to. One is take the accusative, especially in these cases like phlox and onyx, where the consonant changes. And the other thing is remove the initial vowel very often. You very often remove the initial vowel. So onyx tonichi. Okay, the plural is mercifully closer to modern Greek. I don't want to spend any more time with this. Now, another thing here, let's look at the word okonops. Again, take the accusative, ton konopa, but here there are two changes that happen. One is the omega becomes u, yeah? Again, the ancient omega was a long vowel, so it was closer to u, I suppose. So, and the other thing that happens here is, well, it's no longer a masculine word. It's tokunupi, okay? Here the same trick, you take ton arava. How is the modern nominative? O aravas with an S. Okay, and I'll stop here. I want to move to the fragment of the book on the verbs, because this is where it was really tough. I mean, this is the part, verbs is the part that for a modern Greek would be really tough when it comes to learning ancient Greek, because basically here what they're doing, I mean, in this book, in the 1905 book, what they're teaching the students is really ancient Greek. Okay, the words we just show, this is ancient Greek. Okay, or maybe Koine, but it's clearly um, it's not even Katharevousa as the word, as let's say Katharevousa as was written by somebody like Vizinos or Papadiamandis. In the sense that Papadiamandis wouldn't really use the dative. Okay, but in this book you are taught to use the dative. Okay, here notice this. They are making some concessions to modern Greek, so it gives us in the indicative the verb grapho. Okay, so notice here. Okay, παρατατικός, which is the imperfective past. Uh, it gives you the ancient endings. In modern Greek would be έγραφα. Okay, the first person would be different. And also notice that you keep the augment, of course, like in ancient Greek. You could keep the augment regardless of whether it is stressed or not. The simple past actually is mercifully similar. Έγραψα, έγραψες, έγραψε. The difference here is basically the augment and the n here. You could drop the n, the final n in modern Greek, and the third plural. Well, you could have you could have έγραψαν, that's perfectly good Greek, or you could say γράψανε, which is the demotic type, not really accepted by Katharevousa. But other than that, our issues would be basically the same. Simply future the same. Future, well, simply future or perfective future. Imperfective future, nice. What you have here, where you have a difference, is here in the perfect tenses. Okay, they accept θα έχω γράψει, which is what would be used by in common spoken demotic Greek, or if you prefer standard Greek, as we call it now, not back then, of course. The difference would be here, instead of είχα, they would demand είχον. Okay, again, they want this ending, the one you have here. And the other thing that is different here is that they also have a second type, which is yeah, yeah, γεγραμμένον, which is not longer, I mean, used. They could teach students both. I mean, the first type, tachography, is a concession to, let's say, demotic Greek, whereas the second type would be the more purely Katharevousa one. And that's basically all I have to say. To be honest, I don't know these verb types well enough to give you meaningful commentary. I can just say a few things about how they differ or they are similar to modern Greek. Okay. Now I want to move on to this second book. And also I think we're doing quite well on time, so I hope it will not take much longer than half an hour. So again, as I said before, this book is fully conscious that, it's not talking about the Greek as it should be written and spoken. It's more like the Katharevousa version of Greek. Also, this book is for the for students who are between 12 and 14. Let's have a quick look. This book here, I think it's earlier. Yeah, of course. This book here, notice it's for primary school. Okay, this book was intended originally for primary school. Δημοτικά. I suppose it is Δημοτικά because Δημοτικά originally means belonging to the municipality, but I suppose it should be in the meaning we mean today, primary, which is pretty harsh. Whereas this one here would be a bit later. It would be like um, students who are over 12. And as I said, it was published in the last year of the dictatorship, so they didn't really have much time to teach it. A few years after that, the Katharevousa was abolished as a language officially taught at school. But basically, if you see how Katharevousa was taught at school, in this first book we saw, and what would a Greek could do of my generation at, after the abolition of the Katharevousa. For ancient Greek in school, it was very similar. Okay, the main difference would be you wouldn't really expect the student to have output in this language. Once we switch from ancient to Katharevousa to ancient Greek, as what was taught at school, the main difference would be you no longer expect people to follow these patterns when they speak. Anyway, let me get to the substance. The main thing I wanted to comment here, and I'm sorry that the image is not so good. The main thing I want to comment here is this. Well, they no longer teach the dative as it was in ancient Greek. Again, we have here this absurd stuff about long and short vowel. Okay, okay. Actually, here, oh, wonderful. This author makes an explanation. Okay, it explains that long vowels were pronounced longer and short vowels were shorter. But I don't think, again, I don't think this is really sufficient. Yeah, it's just one line. I think that I really feel that for the students to really grasp what this means, they would have to spend a few lectures on that to explain them. Um, and actually, another thing, there were students were taught that Z, okay, this Z here counted as a double consonant, but I don't think that it were really this was really explained that the reason this counted as a double consonant is because in ancient Greek it was pronounced differently. And you can see this is as far as phonetics go here. It's super short. Yeah. Um, yeah, and that's what I told you here. You would have Z here as a double consonant, the blah, but without any explanation. Yeah, it tells you it was S and D together, sigma and delta together, but it doesn't. I mean, I remember I was told that at school, and the explanation was, yeah, if you pronounce S and D together fast, they sound like Z. So I'm not sure the students again got the right impression about you know how the phonology was different. And yeah, here you have some interesting. Let me go back to this because it's quite interesting. You see? So it tells here to people to have tomata and not domata. Okay. And it tells you when you divide words into syllables, you should count these two as two separate letters, the N and T. Yeah. So that's interesting. It was, again, it has a weird mixture of ancient Greek with modern Greek phonetic. The way you pronounce it you really pronounce it the modern way, but you are expected to follow the rules of the ancient pronunciation. It's quite peculiar, this thing. Anyway, what I want to do here is quickly, let me just go to the nouns. Again, here it introduces the spirits. Again, I don't see here, maybe there is somewhere, but not enough explanation of what the spirits are doing. The people at school were taught to just write the spirits as a kind of spelling, nothing beyond that. Okay, but let me go to the substance, which is that the nouns. What I want to show you is this, if I finally find it. So, yeah, here we are. So, look, it's teaching people that the dative, it is a periphrastic dative. It's teaching people that the dative is and ton. Okay, so it differs from modern Greek because in modern Greek this is would become s. Yeah, ston would be just stone. It's different from modern Greek, but they still want to call it. I mean, it's in a parenthesis, but they still want to call it a different case. So, and you can see how this is a watered down version of the previous textbook, where people were actually taught the ancient dative. Okay, so in the previous textbook, people in 1905, people would be taught the ancient dative, and that's it. That was how Katharevousa was supposed to be. um, although they wouldn't really use it. Okay, but here they tell him, okay, you have to use this one, is and ton, is and tus, is and tas, is and ta, and he says in simple Katharevousa there is no vocative for the article. He's talking about the article here, but it tells you we use the epiphonema. I'm not sure I remember the English word. It's o, the one we saw before, but it makes it clear here, which I think is good, that this is not really an article. And it says it's similar to the Greek e, modern Greek e. Uh, let's see here a word. So just to get an idea, yeah? It's interesting, like it has usually the order would be such that the dative should have been here. Third one, after the genitive and before the accusative. But I think in a way to mark that it's not really a case anymore in modern Greek, they put in parentheses and they put it after the accusative. Yeah, which is quite a big difference if you think about it. Yeah, like comparison to what they did in 1905. Now let me go to the back of the book where it has something which I think is very interesting. It has a text in Katharevousa and in modern Greek. I just hope I can find it. Because this is actually one of the most interesting parts of this book. It's like it's showing people how to change from one, I mean, it's one language to the other or one register to the other. The version of the demotic that the book has is quite, let's say, close to ancient Greek actually. Oh, I cannot find it. A second. I think it, yeah, it's right here. Okay, so I found it. Nice. Let's have a look at it because I think this is quite interesting. First of all, it has here some comments, which is like okay, but look here. It says the written. Notice here it says καθαρευούσεις ομιλουμένης και γραφωμένης, both spoken and written. Here it says the written official language of the state called simple καθαρεύουσα, απλή καθαρεύουσα, is an evolved version of the older Katharevousa, in which the laws are written and the decisions of the courts are written, and in which the constitution is written. Okay, novelists usually follow the demotic, and it says, and here is something that is very typical. I have discussed this in my video on Katharevousa. It's like that people who support Katharevousa presenting themselves as supporting a middle ground and presenting the others as extremes. So look at the rhetoric here. Whether in one or the other versions you read something, um, it's not a problem as long as you avoid extremes. Αποφεύγει τας ακρότητας. Okay, so it's trying to tell you that there are two extremes. One is καθαρεύουσα, not the simple, not η απλή καθαρεύουσα, which this author here is advocating, and the other is the demotic, the spoken language. And notice here, it makes the concession here that the spoken language is actually the demotic. He concedes that Katharevousa is mostly primarily a written language, not a spoken language. It's primarily a formal written language for the constitution and the laws. So it's not really the language where you would like literature in. Whereas the 1905 book is way more ambitious. It doesn't make these kind of concessions, and it's actually before Venizelos came to power. With Venizelos and his cooperation with Erdafilidis, you have drastic changes in Greek. Okay, and also apart from the political scheme, you have at this by this time, at the beginnings of 20th century, you certainly have a lot of people who are against the use of Katharevousa. But still, uh, they were in a position of power back then, and they could present it as the official, not the official, the language of the state. That's it, both written and spoken. In 1905, in 1974, we get a very different image, much more nuanced by comparison. Okay, I will not spend more time with this. Again, it has here a conversation about foreign words. Again, it goes back to a very common idea in European languages that my language is pure. I speak pure French and German is weird. I speak a pure language which is supposedly Italian or Spanish or Greek in this case, and the other languages are corrupted. So borrowing from other languages would corrupt my own pure language. Let's not get too much into this. Those of you who are interested, I think it's very interesting to understand what's happening, with the language debate here, to look at this stuff. But let's see here what he thinks, what this author thinks. It's actually the difference between demotic. Okay, so here you have a text in demotic and a text in Katharevousa. I think actually, first of all, let's start with the text in demotic. It says here, δίκαια θαυμάζεται ο Αριστίδης πιο πολύ από κάθε άλλο πολιτικό άνδρα των αρχαίων Αθηνών για τη συνετή διαγωγή του σε όλη τη διάρκεια ή σε όλο το διάστημα της πολιτικής του ζωής. Okay. So, let me first of all highlight here what the author seems to think is demotic, but I don't really think it is. I think it's kind of misguided. And it's this. First of all, very few people, when speaking, would call Athens, would use the plural word. People would say E Athena, not E Athene, as the plural. The second thing that I would notice here is that, well, and actually he makes a concession to this thing here, is that τη διάρκεια, this sounds formal. Το διάστημα sounds much better to me, much more natural. Other than that, this word διαγωγή is also very formal, I have to say, but you see, he tries to keep the same vocabulary between Katharevousa and Demotic as much as possible, and that's why he only changes these words. He only makes a concession here. Okay, before I say more, let's have a look at the Katharevousa text. Δικαίως θαυμάζεται ο Αριστίδης περισσότερον από κάθε άλλον πολιτικών άνδρα των αρχαίων Αθηνών δια την ισόφρονα διαγωγήν του καθ' όλην την διάρκεια του πολιτικού του βίου. One thing that really stands out, I think, especially when you listen to the text, is this final N, which is pretty hard to pronounce because in modern Greek, what usually happens is assimilation between two words. And so it really sort of I feel like it forces me to respect more the distance between words. Like άλλων πολιτικών άνδρα. I have to break it down. When I say άλλο πολιτικό άνδρα, it's just much faster. Much more, I mean, to me at least, because this is the language I speak, it's much more natural. But notice the prominence of this final N here, which is really a marker that I'm speaking this Katharevousa. Okay. Other than that, the two texts are very similar. Notice that both here and here you have the word andra spelled with N, D, and not N, T, which is how most of us would pronounce it. It would be like andra. Of course, he used the polytonic in both versions. I mean, the thing that Katharevousa has to be written in polytonic is just a convention. You might as well write Katharevousa without any stress or with just a monotonic. It's just a convention. but really it's also a sign that you're closer to ancient Greek. So it's also an extra complexity, which I suppose makes it more interesting if you're a philologist. Other than that, there is not much to say here. The demotic they present here to make Katharevousa look better is much closer to Katharevousa than you would actually expect. The other difference, because there are very few differences, is this: the chaos becomes δίκαια here. Okay, so they make the concession that yeah, okay, in modern Greek, the adverb is actually the plural of the neuter in the nominative. Um, let's have a look at this passage as well. Ο Αριστίδης παρευρεθείς και εις τας τρεις ενδόξους κατά των Περσών μάχας, όχι μόνον Ανδρίος ηγονίστη, αλλά εις εκάστην εξ αυτών έδωσε μεγάλα μαθήματα φιλοπατρίας. Okay. First of all, let me notice here, and this is what I will close with, they use formal words. For instance, most of us would say patriotismo, not φιλοπατρίας, and they just take the same word to be used in the demotic. Okay. To me, it's not just that the word φιλοπατρία sounds more formal. In a way, it also sounds a bit empty. You know, patriotismos is a much more emotionally charged word by comparison to φιλοπατρία. Now, other than that, what you have here is this igonisti. It really stands out. First of all, for this ending, isti, which in modern Greek will become istike, agonistike. This combination in general, st, very often in modern Greek becomes st. Yeah. But not just that, notice also that you have here the augment again. Yeah, it's like, well, the augment. To be precise, what you have here, you have, it becomes a long vowel, it became an ita. Αγωνίζομαι became igonisti, but here you don't do this. Okay, so in modern Greek, of course, you wouldn't do that. Again, here you have a final n, monon, which becomes mon. Oh, he actually keeps it here as well. His demotic is remarkably similar to Katharevousa, I have to say. And I think here, actually, what he's doing is he's just telling you, look, agonisti becomes agonistike. Andrios, you could turn it into meandria or andria, because agonistike andria sounds really formal. So I think most of us would just say agonistiche meandria, or something like agonistiche genea is what most modern Greeks would simply say. This text here, again, don't trust it very much. It's not really natural speech. And the other thing is it tells you that, you know, which is something that they will make a really big fuss out of. Notice what's happening here. Παρευρεθείς becomes που παρευρέθηκε. Okay. So this is μετοχή. I guess it's participle in English. And in modern Greek, you would express this with a verb, with a relative clause. Who was present? Instead of, you know, instead of something like being present in the past tense, which is what you have here. Now, why do I say they make a huge story out of this? Well, one thing that is a common place of the people who are defending Katharevousa, let's sum up the common places. Okay, so first, Greek language is pure. So Katharevousa is defending Greek language from the influence of other lower status, less good languages. Okay, which is actually a very common place in Europe in the 19th century. And actually, if you look at languages like French, it's an idea that it's very very prominent even today. Okay, it's just that in Greek this was manifested with a very rigid language rather than just defending it. So that's one thing. Katharevousa is pure, as the word indicates, and is sort of a way of defending our language from these foreign loan words. The second thing, Katharevousa is kind of a middle ground. Um, Now, it's interesting that although Katharevousa was changing a lot, and this is something we have to say, there is not one form of Katharevousa. There are many different forms of Katharevousa, and as I hope this, what we just showed to you, there was quite a significant evolution through time. And of course, different speakers of Katharevousa would speak different Katharevousa, and since when people were speaking, and writing outside the law, like when they were writing literature, like Papadiamantis, they would use a mixture. Whether this mixture would be, let's say, 80% Katharevousa and 20% Demotic, or 50-50, or whatever, was something that was personal, a personal choice. So it's interesting that despite the fact that Katharevousa varied a lot, they would keep presenting from the early 19th century until, you know, when it was abolished, they would keep presenting Katharevousa as the middle ground between ancient Greek and spoken Greek. Okay, this is how it was defended. Or if not spoken Greek, because you can see here it's spoken Greek. In the 1905 book, it would be ancient Greek on the one hand, and on the other hand, it would be something like, well, this bad village talk. It wouldn't be really spoken Greek because Katharevousa had to be spoken as well for them. But again, let me sum it up. One, it's pure. Second, it's a middle ground between two extremes. And three, and this is, I think, this is one of the most damaging ideas of Katharevousa on modern Greek, is that it's concise. Okay, supposedly, well, I mean, not supposedly. Ancient Greek had more inflection than modern Greek. That's true. Modern Greek often will need two words or three words, when ancient Greek would need one word. Which, however, one thing is these words. Okay, so let me get back to the point. So ancient Greek often used one word, where in modern Greek we have two or three words. And okay, the people who like Katharevousa would make the argument that this is better for whatever reason. I mean, to me, it seems really arbitrary to say that a language that uses less words is better, but they would say, yeah, it's more concise. So it's more concise, it's more synthetic, it's more, let's say, it has the ability to put meanings together, and therefore it's a better instrument for thought. That's another very common fallacy of this kind of purist, not only in Greece, but in general, whenever you see purists and prescriptivists talking about language. A very common misconception is that there are certain languages which are better instruments for thought than other languages. There are certain languages which convey meaning better than other languages. There are certain languages that lead to better thoughts. They're better suited for science. And actually, this goes back to, you can trace this kind of bad thought to very reputable authors. For instance, Diderot, the French Enlightenment philosopher Diderot, Denis Diderot, used to think that he actually made the case that, French is the language of science, whereas German and some other languages, they're better for, writing literature in them because they're more emotional, whereas French is the language of reason. You know, so you can find traces of this linguistic superiority and this linguistic nationalism in Katharevousa. What I think is peculiar to Greek, at least in the European languages, is that this was manifested not simply by purifying the existing language, but actually with having at the same time the coexistence of two different languages, this diglossia. And I think I will stop here because it's already pretty long.